Hey, I'm joking 40. I'm the host of Boys from Boston and Beyond. I got a special treat today. I have a retired Boston firefighter, and he was been
Just
on 35 years, I think you said, Bob.
and in total, I was on the job for 32 years.
Yeah, and you reached the height of district fire chief. So what I want to do is I want to talk to Bob about a number of things. The first is a little bit about his background, what it was like being a firefighter in Boston. Then he went out to the Southwest to fight wildland fires. I won't tell you how he got there. I'll let him do that. So why don't we do this? Give us a summary of your early days.
So I made it onto the job. Went to usually the busiest fire companies in the city, studied for lieutenant. And I remember there were 275 applicants for lieutenant, and eventually was a lieutenant, acting lieutenant, then lieutenant, eventually back to the books, got to be captain, got to be a district fire chief for about a dozen years, mostly back in District 8.
So then let's get into the meat of this thing because I had never really heard of Native American firefighters. I kind of knew they existed, but not like most, not much about them. So I think it's really interesting. If you could give a little background, what is a Native American firefighter? We know he's an Indian. How is he trained? Maybe a little history of when it began. With Indians and natural environment, they seem to be ahead of the game. So give us a little bit of the background of the Native American firefighter.
I was very interested in that very same subject years before I retired. Uh, I talked Firehouse Magazine, the people in charge of it then, that this would be a good story, and would they pay for me to go out? And they actually did. I made inroads with the Bureau of Indian Affairs, federal people, because you just don't go out. It's like going to a fire. You have to have an order number. You just don't go out west and go see Native Americans, go visit Native American firefighters. So I had to get permission from the Bureau of Indian Affairs. I did that, and Firehouse Magazine said, "Yeah, why don't you go out and do the story?" So I did that. I flew into Phoenix, and there was a Native American, it was a female Native American, and she used to be a wildland firefighter. She took me around. She made it possible. She had the vehicle. She made it possible for me to go and visit where most white folks don't, which would be the Indian reservations, especially for wildland firefighters and firefighters in general that were Native American. It was a very, very interesting 6 or 7 days. And I did find out an awful lot. I did the story. It covered two magazines. Part one was October of 1999, and part two was in November of 1999. And it was very interesting. And I've also read up on the history of somebody else was writing. I'm not an expert on this, but I can read some of the history if you want me to
Yeah, I'd love
on
that. Yeah, I'd love to hear
America.
about it.
In 2024, there were 3,830 wildfires that originated on BIA, Bureau of Indian Affairs, protected lands and nearby private lands, resulting in approximately 316,000 burned acres. The Bureau of Indian Affairs and tribal wildland fire management programs encompassed 2,915 firefighters and support staff, 7 interagency hotshot crews, 4 tribal managed crews, 12 helicopters, 7 single engine air tankers or seats, different types of wildland engines, different sizes, different types. These wildland firefighters go way back in time where they did know how to use fire long before the white men came along. The white settlers learned from the Native Americans how to protect themselves and make defensible space around their homes. The Native Americans would do that, would burn out areas around their villages so that their homes and teepees, if they were teepees, would not burn. They also used fire for controlling animal populations such as bison, the American bison, by herding them using fire and pushing them to a point where they would fall over a cliff and they would be killed. And then the Native American firefighters would go down there, the Native Americans, and they would finish the job. And that was one way. They did it another way for warfare. They used fire for warfare. So the Native Americans were well versed in wildland firefighting as well as in warfare by the use of fire, and well as protecting themselves. They did it for eating game. They grew crops after they burnt out an area. They were very, very smart about the use of fire. The first fire shelters, if you might have heard, people might have heard about the aluminized tents, small tents
Right.
that wildland firefighters carry in case they're about to be overrun. They have to be trained in how to use these, and that they pull them out of their pouch, they flip them open, they get under, they save themselves from getting burned to death. And there's two different stories about Native Americans using buffalo hides to protect themselves from wildland fire so they didn't get burned.
It's just amazing to see, as I was reading what you sent me and some of the things that they are in such harmony with nature that going
Yes.
back thousands of years, because they had to fight fires back then, but let's just say going back a couple of hundred years, how advanced their techniques were and how they did the things correctly through nature and the use of nature that we have really screwed up, in my view, in many ways.
Oh, yeah.
Fair enough to say?
That's fair enough to say. Not always, but sometimes.
Yeah, so that first shelter you talk about, the buffalo hide, was in the early 19th century. And what made me really interesting that the Indians had the large, well, it shouldn't be, it's their country, but the largest private source of commercial U.S. lumber exceeds 1.4 million acres. It's amazing how much land the Indians own. And of course, when you're living with nature and you're out there, you're going to be fighting fires.
Yeah.
And when did,
Yeah.
so historically, when did it become official? I know in the 30s or something, when Native American firefighters really were organized into a firefighting crew and not just a bunch of Native Americans out there fighting fire. Do you have numbers on that?
Yeah. Here is the CCC, Civilian Conservation Corps. They joined into that, or vice versa, and that was in the 1930s.
Hmm.
The Native American wildland firefighters used to be called the Red Hats. So they went from crews that were just using hand tools and doing backburns to present day, where they have teams that are federally funded, trained, organized, and they make up an awful lot of wildland firefighting personnel that can go anywhere.
Hmm.
There's even one group in the state of Maine that are top-notch wildland firefighters in the state of Maine, but mostly out west, some down south, but mostly in western United States.
Hmm.
So they
So
many,
there's
many.
different tribes too, like Mescalero, right? There's the Red Hats. They're from all over, aren't they? They're from Arizona, New Mexico, and they're
Yeah.
different tribes fighting, within their own team. Is that correct?
That's correct.
What defines a wildland firefighter versus just a regular firefighter?
Wildland firefighters, principally, that's all they do is wildland, and it's seasonal. They're hired on a seasonal level. But out here where I was when I did this story and found out, they are duly trained. They do both wildland and structural and EMS. They're just like any other fire department, except those teams that are just for wildland, and that's seasonal. Off season, they go back to being structural firefighters, EMS, rescue people, same as any fire department.
If you're a Native American firefighter, what differentiates you from any other, a white firefighter, black firefighter? Are you a team that is exclusively made up of Native American firefighters? Is it something that you say, okay, he's a Native American firefighter, he's got his own group, or is it just integrated through all wildland firefighters?
When I went out west and did this story, the people that I interviewed and saw, took pictures of, they were all Native Americans. I mean, this is tribal. Maybe nowadays, with the way things have changed with people and their abilities in white, black, whatever the skin color, but here this is more traditional. They want to be with their own people.
Yes. I'm sure too, with the history and being in harmony with nature, there's a great pride in that. As I learned about this from talking to you and reading the things you sent me, I was just amazed by how the Native American firefighters, or let's say before that, the Native Americans fought fires in terms of clearing spaces all the way down to the blanket, understanding how to clear forests, all the things that would just come natural to an American Indian. What happened in California? Go through the things that caused it and where the Native Americans would have done it differently. I think the fire itself, it had been cleared and there'd been controlled burns and the things the Indians did. I don't think LA, the city would have burned so badly. So why don't you talk about that? That's your expertise, not mine.
Politics, again, unfortunately, enters into almost everything that we do. And firefighting, fire suppression, pre-suppression is all part of that. The politics enters into it. Now, particularly in California, where you have the red state versus the blue state, conservatives, liberals, they think one way, the other thinks another way. They don't like to burn out in California because they figure all this stuff is going in the atmosphere and it's creating problems. Well, if you don't do pre-burn, if you don't clear, you don't have to burn, you can clear cut, not clear cut, you can cut and thin vegetation. If that was done widespread in California, especially Southern California, that fire probably would not have taken on what it did take on, which is when you get winds blowing hurricane force, I don't care. This fire is gonna go. You don't even need to have vegetation. Fire like that is going to start burning and become a true conflagration, which means, according to National Fire Protection Association, NFPA, a conflagration, a true conflagration is an uncontrolled or uncontrollable fire in structures that burn from structure to structure, street to street, and block to block. And that's what happened in LA. The wind pushed it. It was very dry, no question. Weather, humidity, relative humidity, interior humidity of sap of trees, All that comes into play. The key factor is the wind. So that fire would have gone anyway where it did for the most part. The one part that's vital that was talked about was fire hydrants without any water.
Hmm.
And that was in great part due to people not paying attention who should have been paying attention to water supply. It's not the fire chief, it's not the firefighters. They did what they had to do or what they could do in saving lives, and they did save a lot of lives. But when they ran out of water in their systems, that's something else. They might have been able to do a little bit more, but even with a wind like that, you get a stream of water, you get plenty of water, you get plenty of pressure, you're flowing 250 gallons a minute out of one nozzle, one line, one 2.5 inch or 3 inch line, out of a deck gun, 500, 700 gallons a minute. With a wind like that, it's going to turn those streams of water into spray, and it's going to be ineffective.
If you had everything done right there, the water was in the reservoir, was going to the hydrants, with that kind of wind, it's kind of an act of God that you're not gonna. Was there anything you could do with a wind like that to mitigate it? Or it was just like, it doesn't matter. You had said something about GPM versus BTU to control the fire. Explain that and answer, could they have done something even with that wind to lessen the fire? So let's talk about GPM versus BTU.
In a normal fire, without 20, 30, 60, 70 mile an hour winds, and the typical fire, the simple formula is you have to have enough GPMs to overcome the BTUs, gallons per minute, to overcome and cool the British thermal units, the unit of heat. Once you have that, you have enough water to cool and smother, you're gonna put the fire out. But in this particular case, that formula went out the window. They did not have enough water, GPMs, to overcome the BTUs. It was too powerful a fire. Nature's going to do its thing.
Yeah.
Sometimes man, people, no matter what they do, if you get nature, the raw power of nature and fire, it's going to go. But again, we had a powerful wind, very dry conditions, combustible properties close to each other. It's going to go.
What would you do if you were designing it as a chief or a fire commissioner or something to make it better so this doesn't happen again? Or is it just always going to happen when those Santa Anas start blowing?
Traditionally, historically, when the Santa Anas start blowing, these fires get out of control. All right. Uh, Cutting vegetation or burning out vegetation helps. Good water supply, enough adequate fire apparatus, enough adequate crews of people who know what they're doing, enough chief officers who have the experience and knowledge and training to do the best they can with what they have. And don't forget, initially, you're going to have your own people, and then you're going to have to call for mutual aid. And in California, mutual aid's a big deal. And they don't just send 4 or 5 engines when they ask for mutual aid for some of these fires. They have convoys. They have task forces and strike teams. They get them going in very short order. And so they do all they can with a lot of what they've got. And still some of these things, these fires get out of control. It's just the nature of the beast is what you're going to say. But there's certain people who wait for the Santa Anas to blow. And for whatever reason in their minds, they want to light a fire. The other thing is the electric companies, and this is known. that these heavy duty, high voltage systems, they'll break in these strong winds, and that will definitely touch off, and they have in the past touch off these big fires. These electric companies, whether or not they can use better, stronger uh, cabling, wires, don't know. I don't know anything about that. All I know is that some of these fires have been caused by electric wires snapping, arcing, and creating the fire.
Would it be better? California is a tough place because of earthquakes and all. Would it be better to put these underground? It cost a fortune, I'm sure.
It would cost a fortune. That's a lot of electricity going underground, and
Hmm.
electric wires like that give off some heat. And so that all those things that are taken into consideration in the topography, the way it is in California, mountainous in many areas, I don't see how they could possibly do it. They just have to strengthen the whole system that's above ground. And even then, would they be able to strengthen it enough to deal with 50, 60, 70 mile an hour winds? Don't know.
I think California, just by its nature, the Santa Ana winds, the different winds throughout there, the heat, the dryness, is going to be facing fires just like Florida faces hurricanes. It's a fact of life. And there's
It is a
not
fact.
much you can do. You can make it a little better, but you can't mitigate it out of existence, right?
No, and people want to build where they want to build, and they know what could happen. I mean, you can have all the fire prevention you want, you can have all the training you want, but something gets going like this with that kind of wind. I mean, there's a certain amount of luck involved in some of this too, not just great firefighters and great firefighting and great
Right.
equipment. I mean, they do it from the air as well as the ground. If the winds are blowing, those air tankers cannot fly.
Even when things are good and you got a fire going, the turbulence from the heat, flying those aircraft into fires is a really dangerous operation. So when it
Yeah.
gets worse with strong winds and gusts and turbulence, it goes beyond just dangerous. It goes to incredibly dangerous.
Thank you, Joe.
All
Appreciate
right,
it.
man.